The morning sun beat down on Officer James Barkley as he stepped out of his patrol car, adjusting his sunglasses against the glare. It was barely 10 a.m. and sweat already trickled down his back. His uniform felt too tight today, his patience even tighter. Another day in paradise, he muttered to himself, glancing at the reflection in his car window. 15 years on the force and he was still working the streets of downtown Metro. Not exactly where he'd imagined he'd be at 43. Barkley's radio crackled. Unit 347, we've got a traffic violation on 5th and Main. Driver ran a red light. He sighed, pressing the button on his shoulder. Copy that. Unit 347 responding. The morning unfolded like many others. Routine traffic stops, writing tickets, and dealing with irritated drivers making excuses. By noon, Barkley had handed out 3 citations, each one met with the usual protests. But officer, I barely went through the yellow. My speedometer must be broken. Do you know who my brother-in-law is? Each excuse grated on him more than the last. His promotion had been passed over twice now, and here he was, still writing tickets while younger officers moved up the ranks. The department politics were clear enough. You needed connections or exceptional performance. Barkley had neither. After a quick lunch break at his usual diner, where the coffee was strong and the service fast, Barkley was back on patrol when the call came in. All units in the downtown area. We have a domestic dispute reported at 723 Oakwood Avenue. Any available units, please respond. Barkley pressed his radio. Unit 347 responding. ETA 5 minutes. The domestic call turned out to be a shouting match between 2 elderly brothers arguing over their mother's care. No violence. Just decades of family tension boiling over when one brother wanted to move their mother to assisted living, while the other insisted she stay home. It took nearly an hour to calm them both down and make sure the situation was stable. By the time Barkley returned to his car, his shirt was sticking to his back, and his mood had soured completely. His phone buzzed with a text from his ex-wife, reminding him that child support was due tomorrow. Perfect timing. It was approaching 3 p.m. when Barkley drove past the federal building downtown. The imposing structure of glass and concrete housed various government offices, IRS, Social Security, and rumor had it, some intelligence operations. Not that anyone who worked there would confirm or deny such things. That's when he noticed the car. A black sedan with tinted windows, parked in the loading zone near the side entrance. It had been there for at least an hour. Barkley had noticed it earlier on his patrol route. Something about it didn't sit right with him. He pulled his cruiser to the curb about 20 yards away and observed. No movement. No one getting in or out. In the post-9/11 world, a suspicious vehicle near a federal building was nothing to ignore. Barkley radioed in. Unit 347 reporting suspicious vehicle at the federal building east side. Black sedan, heavily tinted windows. Going to check it out. Copy that, 347. Proceed with caution. He approached on foot, circling wide to get a better view. The car was clean, almost too clean. No bumper stickers, no decorations of any kind. The windows were tinted dark enough that he couldn't see inside, which was technically a violation of state law. Something about the car nagged at him. The plates looked different somehow. He squinted but couldn't place what was off about them. As he got closer, Barkley felt a familiar surge of adrenaline. This could be nothing, or it could be something big. A car bomb? A surveillance operation? Drug deal? His mind raced with possibilities, each one offering a path to the recognition he'd been denied for so long. He straightened his back and adjusted his belt, making sure his holster was unclipped. His hand rested near his weapon as he approached the driver's side window. What Barkley failed to notice were several key details. The subtle government plates that, had he looked more carefully, would have been recognizable to any trained officer. The small radio antenna that wasn't standard issue. The perfectly legal federal exemption sticker in the lower corner of the windshield that authorized the window tinting. But Barkley wasn't looking for those details. He was looking for trouble, for an opportunity to prove himself. He also failed to follow the department's protocol for approaching suspicious vehicles near government buildings, a protocol that required calling for backup first and contacting building security to check if the vehicle was authorized. In his eagerness, Barkley approached alone. The late afternoon sun reflected off the black paint as he reached the driver's door. He couldn't see inside at all. For a moment he considered calling for backup, but the thought vanished quickly. If this turned out to be nothing, he'd look paranoid. If it was something, he wanted the credit. Barkley rapped his knuckles against the window hard enough to make sure whoever was inside couldn't ignore him. His other hand stayed close to his weapon, ready to draw if necessary. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then with an electric hum, the window lowered about halfway. The woman inside looked to be in her mid-40s with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a navy blue blazer and had an expression of mild annoyance on her face. "No visible weapons, no suspicious movements. Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice calm and measured. Barkley leaned down slightly, trying to see past her into the vehicle. "License and registration, please. You've been parked in a loading zone for over an hour." The woman didn't reach for anything. "I'm waiting for someone." "The loading zone has a 15-minute limit," Barkley pressed, irritation creeping into his voice. Something about her composure bothered him. Most people showed at least some nervousness when approached by police. This woman seemed completely unfazed. "I understand that," she replied, still making no move to produce identification. "I'll be moving shortly." Barkley's patience, already worn thin by the day's events, began to fray. "Ma'am, I need to see some ID now." The woman sighed almost imperceptibly. "I'm Agent Chen. I'm here on official business." "Agent?" Barkley's eyebrows rose. "Agent of what exactly? FBI, CIA, Tooth Fairy?" The sarcasm was unprofessional, but he was past caring. "I don't see a badge. I don't see ID. For all I know, you could be planning to blow up this building." A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps, or disbelief crossed her face before her expression returned to neutral. "Officer, I suggest you step back and call your supervisor." That was exactly the wrong thing to say to Barkley, especially today. His face flushed. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am. Now." A few pedestrians had slowed their pace, watching the interaction with curious expressions. One young man had even taken out his phone, likely recording the encounter. "Officer," the woman said quietly, "you're making a mistake." "The mistake was parking illegally and then refusing to identify yourself," Barkley shot back. "Last time, step out of the vehicle or I will remove you myself." The woman made no move to comply, instead reaching slowly toward the inside pocket of her blazer. "I'm reaching for my credentials," she stated clearly. Barkley tensed, his hand moving to his holster. "Keep your hands where I can see them." A small crowd was gathering now. The afternoon foot traffic from the federal building had picked up as workers ended their day. Several more phones were out, recording the confrontation. The woman's hand paused. "Officer, I am a federal agent conducting surveillance. You are compromising an operation and creating a scene. I strongly advise you to stand down and contact your superior." Barkley wasn't backing down now, not with an audience. "If you're a federal agent, let's see some proof. Otherwise, step out of the vehicle." For the first time, a hint of frustration crossed the woman's face. "Very well." She slowly reached into her blazer again, this time withdrawing a small leather wallet. She flipped it open to reveal a badge and ID card. Barkley leaned in to examine it, his eyes widening slightly as he read the credentials. Special Agent Catherine Chen, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The world seemed to slow down as the implications sank in. Barkley had just confronted an FBI agent, caused a scene, and potentially compromised whatever operation she was conducting. All because he'd been too impatient, too eager to assert his authority without following proper protocol. As he stood there, frozen in the moment before everything would change, pedestrians continued to record the encounter on their phones. Barkley didn't know it yet, but his career had just taken a turn from which it might never recover. Agent Chen's expression hadn't changed, but her eyes had hardened. She reached for her phone with deliberate slowness. "Officer Barkley," she said, reading his nameplate. "I need to make a call to your precinct, Captain. Now." Agent Chen held Barkley's gaze as she dialed a number on her phone. The crowd of onlookers had grown, their phones recording every second of the encounter. Barkley's collar felt tight against his neck, a drop of sweat rolling down his temple despite the cooling afternoon air. "This is Special Agent Chen." She spoke into the phone, her voice calm but firm. "I need to speak with Captain Wilson immediately." Barkley shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Captain Wilson?" His direct supervisor, the man who had passed him over for promotion twice now. "Yes, I'll hold," Agent Chen continued, never breaking eye contact with Barkley. A middle-aged man in a business suit had stopped nearby. "Is everything okay here, officer?" he called out. Before Barkley could respond, Agent Chen spoke up. "Sir, please move along. This is official business." The authority in her voice worked instantly. The man nodded and continued walking, though he glanced back over his shoulder. "Yes, Captain Wilson," Agent Chen finally said into her phone. "This is Special Agent Catherine Chen with the FBI. I'm currently being detained by one of your officers outside the federal building." A pause. Officer James Barkley. Barkley could feel his career crumbling with each word. He'd acted on instinct, on frustration. He hadn't followed protocol. He hadn't called for backup or checked with building security. "I understand," Agent Chen said. 20 minutes? That works. We'll be here." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. "Your captain is on his way," she informed him. He seemed quite concerned. Barkley found his voice. "Look, I was just doing my job." "Suspicious vehicle, federal building." "Officer Barkley," Agent Chen cut him off. "You were not just doing your job. If you were, you would have called dispatch to check if this vehicle was cleared to be here. You would have contacted federal building security. You would have called for backup before approaching a vehicle you deemed suspicious." Each point hit Barkley like a physical blow. She was right, and they both knew it. "Instead," she continued, "you approached alone, escalated a situation unnecessarily, and potentially compromised a federal investigation. And you did it all while being recorded by at least 7 different civilians." Barkley glanced around. She was right about that too. Several people still lingered, phones out, capturing every moment of his humiliation. "I didn't know you were FBI," he said weakly. "That's precisely the point. You didn't know who I was or what I was doing, yet you chose the most aggressive approach possible." Agent Chen's tone wasn't angry. That would have been easier to take. It was disappointment, like a teacher speaking to a student who should have known better. Barkley took a step back from the car, trying to gather his thoughts. How could he spin this? Was there any way to salvage the situation? "May I ask what kind of operation I've interrupted?" he asked, hoping to find some sympathy. Agent Chen raised an eyebrow. "That's classified, though I suspect your actions have rendered much of it moot anyway." The next 20 minutes were the longest of Barkley's career. He stood awkwardly by the black sedan, neither fully retreating to his patrol car nor engaging further with Agent Chen. She had rolled her window back up and appeared to be making calls, completely ignoring his presence. The crowd had mostly dispersed, though occasional passers-by still slowed to take in the scene. A uniformed officer standing uncomfortably beside an unmarked car, clearly waiting for something. When Captain Wilson's unmarked police car pulled up, Barkley's stomach dropped. The captain was not a man who appreciated problems, and Barkley had just created a big one. Captain Wilson stepped out, his salt and pepper hair neatly trimmed, his uniform crisp despite the late afternoon hour. His expression was unreadable as he approached, but the tight set of his jaw told Barkley everything he needed to know. "Officer Barkley." He nodded curtly, before turning his attention to the black sedan. Agent Chen's window rolled down once more. "Captain Wilson?" "Catherine Chen, FBI. Agent Chen, I apologize for any inconvenience my officer may have caused. May I ask what happened here?" Agent Chen recounted the events succinctly. Barkley's approach, his failure to follow protocol, his escalation of the situation, the gathering crowd, the recordings. She didn't embellish or exaggerate. She didn't need to. The facts were damning enough. Captain Wilson listened without interruption, his expression growing grimmer with each detail. When she finished, he turned to Barkley. "Is this accurate, officer?" Barkley wanted to defend himself, to explain the frustrations of his day, the suspiciousness of the car, his instincts as a veteran officer. But none of it would change the facts. "Yes, sir," he admitted. "I didn't follow protocol." Captain Wilson's jaw tightened further. "Return to your patrol car, Officer Barkley. Wait for me there." "Yes, sir." Barkley retreated, feeling the eyes of both his superior and the FBI agent on his back. From his patrol car, Barkley watched as Captain Wilson engaged in an intense conversation with Agent Chen. He couldn't hear their words, but the captain's body language told the story. Apologetic, concerned, professional. After several minutes, they exchanged what appeared to be contact information. The captain even smiled briefly before returning to his serious demeanor. When Captain Wilson finally approached Barkley's patrol car, the officer braced himself. The captain opened the passenger door and sat down beside him, closing the door with deliberate care. For a long moment he said nothing, staring straight ahead through the windshield. 15 years on the force, Barkley, he finally said. 15 years and you still managed to surprise me. Barkley remained silent. Do you have any idea what you've done today? Captain Wilson turned to face him. Any concept of the ramifications? I made a mistake, sir, Barkley offered. A mistake? The captain's voice rose slightly. A mistake is filing paperwork incorrectly. A mistake is being late for roll call. What you did was compromise a 3-month FBI operation, targeting a network of white-collar criminals operating out of the federal building. Barkley felt the blood drain from his face. 3 months? Agent Chen and her team have been building a case against an embezzlement ring that's been siphoning government funds. They were expecting a key suspect to make contact today. Instead, they got you creating a scene drawing attention to their surveillance operation, scaring off potential suspects. Each word hit Barkley like a hammer blow. He'd not only embarrassed himself and the department, he'd potentially derailed a major federal investigation. The only saving grace, Captain Wilson continued, is that Agent Chen is a consummate professional. She's agreed not to file a formal complaint against you or the department. A small mercy, but Barkley wasn't foolish enough to think he was off the hook. However, the captain continued, there will be consequences. Effective immediately, you're on administrative leave pending a full review of this incident. Administrative leave? Barkley repeated, stunned. For how long? That depends on the review board, Captain Wilson replied coolly. 2 weeks minimum. Could be longer. Could be permanent. The implication was clear. Barkley's job was on the line. I need your badge and your service weapon. The captain held out his hand. Barkley stared at the outstretched palm. This was really happening. Slowly, he unclipped his badge from his uniform and placed it in the captain's hand. Next came his gun, carefully removed from its holster. I'll drive you back to the station, Captain Wilson said. Another officer will take your patrol car. The ride back to the station was silent. Barkley stared out the window, watching the city streets pass by. Streets he'd patrolled for 15 years. Streets he might never patrol again. At the station, the news had already spread. Officers avoided his gaze as Captain Wilson escorted him to his locker to collect his personal belongings. The usual banter and chatter of the precinct fell silent as he passed. Report to Internal Affairs tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., Captain Wilson instructed as they reached the exit. They'll want your full statement. Barkley nodded numbly. One more thing, Barkley, the captain added. Those civilian recordings? They're already online. The department's public affairs office is fielding calls from 3 different news outlets. Of course they were. In today's world, nothing stayed private for long. By morning, everyone would know about Officer James Barkley and his confrontation with an FBI agent. His friends, his neighbors, his ex-wife, his kids. Go home, Barkley, Captain Wilson said, his tone softening just slightly. Get some rest. You're going to need it. As Barkley stepped out into the early evening air, no longer an active police officer for the first time in 15 years, the weight of the day's events finally hit him fully. One bad day, one bad decision, and everything had changed. He hailed a taxi, unable to face the thought of public transportation where he might be recognized. Where to? The driver asked. Barkley gave his address, then leaned back in the seat, closing his eyes. The day replayed in his mind, the traffic violations, the domestic dispute, the black sedan, Agent Chen's face, Captain Wilson's disappointment. If only he could go back to this morning and do it all differently. But there was no rewinding time, no undoing what had been done. The taxi pulled away from the curb, carrying Barkley toward an uncertain future he had never imagined for himself. Meanwhile, back at the federal building, Agent Chen was making a very different kind of call. Agent Chen watched the police captain's car pull away from the curb. Officer Barkley slumped in the passenger seat. She allowed herself a moment of frustration, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. 3 months of careful surveillance work, potentially compromised because one officer couldn't follow basic protocol. She picked up her secure phone and dialed a number from memory. It's Chen, she said when the call connected. We have a situation. The voice on the other end belonged to Special Agent Thomas Rivera, her team lead and the architect of this operation. How bad? Rivera asked, skipping any pleasantries. Local police officer made a scene. Drew attention to the surveillance position. Crowd gathered, phones out, recording everything. Chen kept her voice even, sticking to the facts. The suspect was scheduled to make contact in less than an hour. A sharp intake of breath from Rivera's end. And now? Now we assume they've been spooked. If they had any counter-surveillance of their own in place, they would have seen the whole thing. Chen looked out her window at the federal building. Somewhere inside those walls, a network of government employees was systematically embezzling federal funds. Millions of dollars over the past 5 years. The FBI had been building their case meticulously, following money trails, documenting suspicious patterns, and identifying the key players. Today was supposed to be a breakthrough. Their primary suspect, a mid-level manager named Howard Green, was scheduled to meet with an unknown contact, potentially the ringleader they'd been trying to identify. What about Green? Rivera asked, unknown. He's still inside the building as far as we know, but if he was planning to make contact outside, he won't now. Rivera finished her thought. Have you moved positions? Not yet. Wanted to check in first. There was a pause as Rivera considered their options. Stay put for now. We still have eyes on all exits. If Green leaves the building, we'll track him. Maybe this spooked the contact, but not Green himself. Copy that, Chen replied. What about the officer? The one who approached you? Chen allowed herself a thin smile. Currently riding back to his station with his captain. Badge and gun confiscated from what I could see. He's on administrative leave pending review. Good, Rivera said without sympathy. Actions have consequences. After ending the call, Chen settled back into surveillance mode. The federal building's main entrance was visible from her position, though she'd need to reposition soon. Her cover was blown at this location. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text from another team member positioned on the opposite side of the building. Green still at desk. Acting normal. Maybe the operation wasn't completely compromised after all. If Green hadn't been alerted to the commotion outside, there was still a chance they could salvage something from this mess. 2 hours later, as the workday ended and the federal building began emptying of its daily occupants, Chen had moved to a secondary position in a coffee shop across the street. From her table by the window, she had a clear view of the main entrance while appearing to be just another government worker, unwinding after a long day. Her tablet showed a news site open, but she wasn't reading it. Instead, her attention was fixed on the doors, watching each person who exited. Her earpiece crackled softly. Green is on the move, headed toward the main exit. Chen took a sip of her coffee, eyes never leaving the entrance. Copy that. Moments later, Howard Green emerged, briefcase in hand, looking exactly like the photos in his file. Average height, thinning brown hair, unremarkable suit. Nothing about him screamed criminal mastermind, but that was often the case with white-collar crime. The most successful perpetrators were those who blended in perfectly. Green paused at the top of the steps, checking his watch. He seemed to be waiting for something or someone. All units, stay alert. Rivera's voice came through the earpiece. He's waiting. The contact might still show. Chen kept her gaze casual, not focusing too obviously on Green. Years of training had taught her how to observe without being observed. Green checked his watch again, then pulled out his phone. He appeared to read a message, his face darkening with what looked like disappointment or frustration. After a moment, he put the phone away and descended the steps, heading toward the parking garage. He's moving to the garage, Chen reported quietly. Looks like he received a message that changed his plans. Roger that, Rivera responded. Chen, follow on foot. Anderson will have the car ready. Chen left a few dollars on the table for her coffee and casually exited the shop, maintaining a discreet distance behind Green. As she walked, her mind returned briefly to Officer Barkley. Had his interference cost them their one chance to identify the ringleader? 3 months of work potentially undone by one officer's poor judgment. Green entered the parking garage with Chen about 30 seconds behind him. The garage was dim and echoing, half empty now as most workers had already left for the day. Level 2, Row C. Green's tracker pinged on Chen's phone. Their surveillance team had placed a tracker on his vehicle weeks ago. Chen took the stairs rather than the elevator, emerging on Level 2 just in time to see Green approach his car, a modest gray sedan that matched his unremarkable appearance. But Green wasn't alone. A woman in a tailored business suit stood by his car, arms crossed. Even from a distance, Chen recognized her. Diane Powell, Deputy Director of Financial Operations for the department. Powell wasn't on their radar as a suspect. In fact, she had been interviewed as a potential witness early in the investigation. Chen ducked behind a concrete pillar, activating her comm. Rivera, Green is meeting with Powell. Deputy Director Powell. Powell? Rivera sounded surprised. Are you sure? Positive, Chen confirmed, risking a glance around the pillar. Green and Powell were engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion. Powell's body language was tense, her finger occasionally jabbing toward Green's chest. I need audio, Chen whispered. Working on it, came the reply. Anderson is repositioning the directional mic. Chen kept her eyes on the pair. Whatever they were discussing, it wasn't friendly. Green kept shaking his head, hands spread in what looked like a defensive gesture. Had to cancel. Powell's voice suddenly came through Chen's earpiece. The directional microphone finally in position. Too risky now. What wasn't my fault, Green protested. Some cop was hassling a car outside. How was I supposed to know? Chen felt a surge of satisfaction. So Officer Barkley's blunder had indeed spooked their suspects, but it was also confirming a connection they hadn't previously identified. Don't care whose fault it was. Powell's voice came through clearer now. The meeting's off. Tell the others to lay low for a while. For how long? Until I say so, Powell snapped. 3 years we've run this without a hitch, and now suddenly there's police attention? It's not a coincidence. Chen could hardly believe what she was hearing. Powell wasn't just involved. Based on her tone and words, she appeared to be the ringleader they'd been looking for all along. Rivera, are you getting this? Chen whispered. Every word, he confirmed. Keep watching. Powell handed Green what looked like an envelope. Destroy the original documents. Use the contingency accounts we set up. No electronic transfers for at least 2 weeks. Green took the envelope, his expression unhappy but compliant. And the shipment scheduled for Friday? Delayed. I'll let you know when we reschedule. Powell checked her watch. I need to go. Remember, no contact with any of the others, not even text. As Powell turned to leave, Chen quickly snapped several photos with her phone, the camera making no sound. Do we take them now? Chen asked urgently. There was a pause before Rivera responded. Negative. We don't have enough for an arrest yet. We need the documents, the accounts, the whole network. This is bigger than we thought if Powell is involved. Chen watched as Powell walked to her own car, a luxury SUV parked several spaces away. Green remained by his sedan, looking at the envelope in his hands with a troubled expression. Follow Powell, Rivera instructed. Anderson will stay on Green. We need to know where she goes, who she talks to. Chen acknowledged the order and began making her way toward the garage exit, where she could circle around to her own vehicle without being spotted. As she moved, she couldn't help but think about the irony of the situation. Officer Barkley's inappropriate confrontation had indeed disrupted their original plan, but it had also flushed out their primary target, someone they hadn't even suspected. In law enforcement, sometimes even mistakes could lead to breakthroughs. Not that this excused Barkley's behavior, but at least some good might come from it. Chen reached her car and prepared to follow Powell. The case had just taken an unexpected turn, and she had a feeling the next few days would be crucial. If they moved carefully now, they could take down not just Green and his immediate associates, but the entire operation, led by a deputy director who had abused her position of trust. As she pulled out of her parking space, Chen allowed herself a small smile. Officer Barkley would never know it, but his blunder might just help them crack one of the biggest embezzlement cases in the department's history. The game wasn't over yet. It had only become more interesting. James Barkley stared at the ceiling of his bedroom, watching the early morning sunlight creep across the textured surface. He hadn't slept well. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw Agent Chen's face, heard Captain Wilson's disappointed voice, felt the weight of his badge leaving his hand. The alarm clock read 6:15 a.m., the time he would normally be getting up for his shift. But there was no shift today, no uniform to put on, no badge to clip to his belt. His phone had been buzzing with notifications since last night. News of his confrontation with an FBI agent had spread quickly through the department, and from there to social media. He hadn't checked any of it, couldn't bring himself to see what people were saying. With a heavy sigh, Barkley swung his legs over the side of the bed. His meeting with Internal Affairs wasn't until 9 a.m., but he couldn't stay in bed any longer. The walls of his small apartment felt like they were closing in. In the kitchen, he made coffee on autopilot, the routine familiar even as everything else in his life seemed to be crumbling. As the coffee brewed, he finally steeled himself to look at his phone. 23 text messages, 11 missed calls, 5 voicemails. The first text was from his ex-wife. "Jim, Tommy saw a video of you on TikTok. What's going on? Call me." His son had seen it. Of course he had. Kids saw everything these days. Barkley felt a fresh wave of shame wash over him. Most of the other messages were from fellow officers, some offering sympathy, others just fishing for gossip. One from his union rep, letting him know they'd be at the IA meeting with him. He scrolled through his news feed, wincing as he saw the headlines. Metro officer confronts undercover FBI agent. Compromises federal investigation. Police officer on leave after viral confrontation with FBI. Cop's mistake. When local law enforcement meets federal agents. Several had the video embedded, different angles from different bystanders' phones. Barkley couldn't bring himself to press play. He didn't need to see his humiliation from multiple perspectives. His coffee sat cooling on the counter as he scrolled, each headline another blow to his already battered pride. 15 years on the force, and this was what he'd be remembered for. This one mistake. The phone rang in his hand, startling him. It was his union representative, Dave Kelly. "Jim, you up?" Kelly's voice was professionally concerned. "Yeah, I'm up. Hard to sleep when your career's going down in flames." Kelly sighed. "It's not as bad as you think, really. Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty bad. Look, I've been talking with the brass. Yes, you messed up. Yes, there will be consequences. But we might be able to salvage something here." Barkley took a sip of his now lukewarm coffee. "I'm listening." "The FBI agent, Chen, she didn't file a formal complaint against you or the department. That's huge, Jim. Without that, this becomes an internal matter. The videos. Show an officer being thorough about a suspicious vehicle," Kelly cut in. "Yes, you didn't follow protocol, and yes, that's going to be addressed. But we can work with this. Trust me." Barkley wanted to believe him, but hope felt dangerous right now. "I'll pick you up at 8:30 for the IA meeting," Kelly continued. "Wear your Class A uniform. Look sharp. Show them you're taking this seriously." After hanging up, Barkley stood under the shower for a long time, letting the hot water wash over him as he rehearsed what he would say to Internal Affairs. No excuses. Take responsibility. Express regret. Promise to do better. Whether they'd give him the chance to do better remained to be seen. Across town, in a nondescript office building that housed the local FBI field office, Agent Catherine Chen hadn't gone home at all. The discovery of Deputy Director Powell's involvement in the embezzlement scheme had kicked their investigation into high gear. The conference room had been transformed into a war room, photos, documents and timelines covering the walls. The team had worked through the night, pulling financial records, reviewing surveillance footage, and mapping connections. Powell visited 3 locations after leaving the garage. Chen reported to the assembled team, pointing to a map on the wall. First, her home in the Westridge neighborhood. She stayed for approximately 45 minutes, then drove to this restaurant in the financial district where she met with this man. She tapped a photograph of a well-dressed older man entering the restaurant. Richard Donovan, former Treasury Department official, now private consultant. They dined for an hour and 20 minutes. Our lip-reading expert is still working on their conversation from the restaurant camera footage, but it appears they were discussing contingency plans. Special Agent Rivera nodded. "And the third location?" "A storage facility on the edge of town," Chen said. She entered with a small briefcase and left without it 17 minutes later. "We've obtained a warrant to search the unit, but we're holding off until we have a better understanding of their entire operation." "Good call," Rivera agreed. "We rush this, we might miss bigger fish." Another agent raised his hand. "What about the officer who compromised the original surveillance? Any blowback we need to worry about?" Chen shook her head. "Local issue. Their internal affairs is handling it. Our focus needs to be on Powell and her network." Speaking of which, Rivera pointed to a financial chart on the wall. Our analysts have identified a pattern in the fund transfers. Every quarter for the past 3 years, approximately $2.3 million has been moved through a series of accounts before disappearing offshore. Based on Powell's position, she would have had the authority to approve these transfers without additional oversight. Chen studied the chart. And Green? Mid-level manager in accounting. Perfect position to doctor the paperwork and make everything look legitimate. What about Donovan's role? Chen asked. Rivera clicked a remote, bringing up another financial diagram on the large screen. We think he's their money man. After the funds go offshore, they're invested through a series of shell companies. Donovan has connections in banking throughout Southeast Asia, so we have the how, Chen said. Now we need the who else and concrete evidence to make the charges stick. That's where these come in, Rivera said, holding up a stack of warrants. Judge signed them an hour ago. Full surveillance package on Powell, Green, and Donovan. Phones, emails, homes, vehicles, everything. Chen nodded, a sense of satisfaction building. What had started as a disrupted operation was now expanding into something much bigger. Sometimes, she reflected, an unexpected shakeup was exactly what an investigation needed. Let's get moving, she said. I want ears on their phones by noon. Back at police headquarters, Officer Barkley sat stiffly in the waiting area outside the Internal Affairs office. His Class A uniform felt tight around the neck, though he'd lost weight in recent months. Maybe it was just his imagination or his conscience making him uncomfortable. Dave Kelly sat beside him, reviewing notes on a tablet. Remember, he said quietly, be straight with them. Own the mistake, but emphasize your record. 15 years, no major disciplinary actions. That counts for something. Barkley nodded, though he wasn't convinced it would count for enough. The door opened and a stern-faced woman in a dark suit appeared. Officer Barkley, Lieutenant Pierce will see you now. Barkley stood, straightening his uniform jacket. Kelly gave him a reassuring nod as they followed the woman into the office. Lieutenant Pierce was a veteran IA officer known for his thoroughness and fairness. He didn't smile as Barkley entered, but he wasn't openly hostile either. Officer Barkley, Mr. Kelly, please sit. As they settled into their chairs, Pierce opened a file folder on his desk. I've reviewed the incident reports, witness statements, and available video footage of your encounter with FBI Special Agent Chen yesterday. I've also spoken with Captain Wilson and reviewed your service record. Barkley sat perfectly still, hands resting on his knees. Before we begin, Pierce continued, I want to be clear about something. This is not a witch hunt. We're here to understand what happened, why it happened, and to determine appropriate next steps. Understood? Yes, sir, Barkley replied. Good. Now, in your own words, walk me through yesterday's events. Starting with when you first noticed the vehicle in question, Barkley took a deep breath and began his account. He didn't make excuses, didn't try to justify his actions. He simply told the truth about noticing the car, about his suspicions, about his failure to follow protocol. When he finished, Pierce leaned back in his chair. Officer Barkley, why didn't you call for backup or check with dispatch before approaching the vehicle? This was the question Barkley had been dreading because he didn't have a good answer. I thought I could handle it myself, sir. That's not procedure, especially for a suspicious vehicle near a federal building. No, sir, it's not. Pierce studied him for a moment. Your record indicates you're generally by the book, Officer Barkley. 15 years, mostly positive evaluations, a few commendations, no major disciplinary issues. So what was different about yesterday? Barkley hesitated, then decided complete honesty was his only option. I was frustrated, sir. 3 traffic stops, a domestic call that ate up my afternoon, passed over for promotion twice. I guess I saw a chance to do something important, something that might get noticed in a good way, and I rushed it. Pierce nodded slowly. Thank you for your candor, officer. That's all for now. The review board will meet tomorrow to discuss your case. You'll be notified of their decision within 48 hours. As Barkley and Kelly left the office, Barkley felt strangely lighter. Not optimistic exactly, but relieved to have told the truth. Whatever happened next, at least he'd faced his mistake honestly. That went as well as could be expected, Kelly said as they walked toward the exit. Now we wait. Barkley nodded, his mind already drifting to what his life might look like if his police career was truly over. 15 years was a long time to define yourself by one job, one identity. Jim? He looked up to see Captain Wilson approaching from the other end of the hallway. The captain's expression was unreadable. "Sir?" Barkley straightened instinctively. "A word in private?" Wilson glanced meaningfully at Kelly. The union rep squeezed Barkley's shoulder. "I'll wait outside." Once Kelly had moved out of earshot, Wilson lowered his voice. "I just got a call from the FBI field office. Agent Chen asked me to pass along a message." Barkley braced himself for more bad news. She said, and I quote, "Sometimes disruptions lead to unexpected breakthroughs." She wouldn't elaborate, but she also said the FBI won't be pursuing any action against you or the department. Barkley blinked in surprise. "Sir?" "I don't know what it means either," Wilson admitted. "But it sounds like maybe your screw-up had a silver lining for their investigation." For the first time since the incident, Barkley felt a tiny flicker of hope. It didn't undo his mistake, but if some good had come from it— "Thank you for telling me, sir." Wilson nodded curtly. "Don't think this gets you off the hook with IA, Barkley, but it might help." As the captain walked away, Barkley stood alone in the hallway, trying to make sense of Agent Chen's cryptic message. What breakthrough? How could his blunder possibly have helped their investigation? He supposed he might never know. But it was something to hold on to as he waited to learn his fate. 2 weeks had passed since Officer Barkley's confrontation with Agent Chen. 2 weeks of administrative leave. 2 weeks of avoiding the news, dodging calls from reporters, and explaining to his son why Dad wasn't going to work. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of his apartment as Barkley buttoned his uniform shirt. The review board had reached their decision yesterday. A month's suspension without pay, mandatory retraining on departmental protocols, and 6 months of probation. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than termination. He still had a job. Today marked his first mandatory meeting with his newly assigned supervisor, Lieutenant Sandra Rodriguez. The department had decided he needed closer oversight when he returned to active duty. As Barkley knotted his tie, his phone buzzed with a text from Captain Wilson. "Before your meeting with Rodriguez, stop by my office." Barkley frowned at the message. What did Wilson want? The captain had been professionally distant throughout the review process, offering neither support nor condemnation. Had something changed? The police station felt different as Barkley walked through the doors. Conversations paused briefly as he passed. Some officers nodded in greeting. Others found sudden interest in their paperwork. His story had become department legend in record time. The cop who harassed an FBI agent and lived to tell the tale. Captain Wilson's door was open, but Barkley knocked anyway. "Come in, Barkley." "Close the door behind you." Wilson wasn't alone. A familiar figure sat in one of the chairs facing his desk. Agent Catherine Chen. She looked exactly as she had that day, professional and composed in a navy blue suit. "Officer Barkley." She nodded in greeting. "Agent Chen," he replied, suddenly very aware of his posture. "I didn't expect to see you again." "Have a seat." Wilson gestured to the empty chair beside Chen. Barkley sat stiffly, unsure what was happening. Was this some kind of formal reprimand? A final debriefing before he started his retraining? "Agent Chen has requested this meeting," Wilson explained. "She has something she'd like to discuss with you." Chen turned slightly to face Barkley. "Officer Barkley, I wanted to update you personally on certain developments following our encounter." Barkley braced himself. "Ma'am, before you continue, I want to apologize again for my actions that day. It was unprofessional and—" Chen held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "I'm not here for another apology, officer. I'm here because I thought you deserved to know something." She glanced at Wilson, who nodded for her to continue. "The operation you inadvertently disrupted that day was surveillance on a suspected embezzlement ring operating within the federal building. We had identified a mid-level manager as part of the scheme, but we were missing key pieces, specifically the identity of the ringleader." Barkley listened intently, still not sure where this was going. "Your confrontation with me created a ripple effect," Chen continued. "It spooked our suspects, causing them to change their plans. In doing so, they revealed connections we hadn't previously identified." She placed a newspaper on the desk between them. The headline read, "Federal Bust Deputy Director and 5 others arrested in $30 million embezzlement scheme." "This is from yesterday," Chen said. "What it doesn't mention is that your actions, while procedurally incorrect, actually helped us crack the case." Barkley stared at the headline, trying to process what she was saying. "I don't understand. How did I help?" When you approached my vehicle and created that scene, it forced our primary suspect to contact his superior, Deputy Director Diane Powell. Powell wasn't even on our radar at that point. Your disruption essentially flushed her out into the open. Captain Wilson leaned forward. Agent Chen has explained this to the chief and the review board. It doesn't change the fact that you failed to follow protocol, but it does add context. We arrested Powell, our original suspect Green, and 4 others yesterday morning, Chen continued. We recovered financial documents, offshore account information, and evidence of a scheme that had been operating for over 3 years. $30 million of taxpayer money, diverted through fake contracts and shell companies. Barkley shook his head in disbelief. And my mistake helped you find this? Sometimes in law enforcement, unexpected disruptions create opportunities, Chen said. Your approach was wrong, but the outcome worked in our favor. I thought you should know that. There was a moment of silence as Barkley absorbed this information. His career-threatening mistake had accidentally helped break open a major federal case. Thank you for telling me, he finally said. Chen stood, straightening her jacket. I've also recommended to your department that your experience be incorporated into interagency training. Local officers need to understand federal operations better, and federal agents need to coordinate more effectively with local law enforcement. Captain Wilson nodded. We're already working on implementing new protocols. As Chen prepared to leave, she paused at the door. Officer Barkley, one more thing. Learn from this, but don't let it define you. We all make mistakes. It's what we do afterward that matters. With that, she was gone, leaving Barkley with a strange mix of emotions, relief, lingering embarrassment, and something like vindication. Captain Wilson cleared his throat. Your meeting with Lieutenant Rodriguez is still happening, Barkley. This doesn't change your suspension or probation, but I thought you should hear this before you begin your retraining. I understand, sir. Thank you. As Barkley left the captain's office, he felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. His mistake hadn't been erased, but knowing some good had come from it made the burden easier to bear. 6 months later, Agent Chen stood at the front of a packed training room at the FBI Academy. Behind her, a PowerPoint slide displayed the title of her presentation: Interagency Cooperation, Lessons from Field Operations. The Powell case began as a standard embezzlement investigation, she explained to the room, full of new agents and veteran law enforcement officers. But it evolved into something much more complex, largely due to an unexpected development. She clicked to the next slide, which showed a diagram of how the case had unfolded. When local law enforcement inadvertently interfered with our surveillance, it could have derailed the entire operation. Instead, it created an opportunity that led us to the head of the criminal enterprise. In the back row, Officer James Barkley listened attentively. He was here as part of his department's new exchange program with federal agencies, a direct result of the Powell case. His 6 months of probation had ended the previous week, and his captain had selected him for this training opportunity. The lesson here isn't that disruptions are good, Chen continued. It's that proper communication between agencies is essential, and that adaptability in the field can turn setbacks into advantages. As the presentation continued, Barkley took careful notes. His experience had become a case study in what not to do, but also in how unexpected circumstances could yield positive results. During the lunch break, he found himself standing next to Agent Chen at the coffee station. Officer Barkley, she acknowledged him with a nod. I'm glad your department sent you. It was unexpected, he admitted, but I'm grateful for the opportunity. Chen stirred her coffee thoughtfully. How has it been back on the job? Different, Barkley said after a moment. Better in some ways. I'm more careful, more thoughtful about procedure. And the other officers? Barkley smiled slightly. The jokes have mostly stopped. Though I still get called Fed Whisperer sometimes, Chen actually chuckled at that. Could be worse, definitely could be worse, he agreed. I could have lost my badge permanently. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Two professionals who had moved past an unfortunate first meeting. You know, Chen said, we're doing a demonstration this afternoon on proper approach protocols for suspicious vehicles. Might be good to have a perspective from local law enforcement. Barkley recognized the olive branch for what it was. I'd be happy to contribute, though I'm not sure I'm the best example. On the contrary, Chen replied, Sometimes the best teachers are those who've learned the hard way. As they walked back to the training room, Barkley reflected on the strange path that had brought him here. One bad,